Hello, welcome to DecentraLounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your institutional SOC 2 Type 2 certified, truly decentralized bare metal staking service provider. Today's guest is a true innovator at the intersection of gaming, scalability, and blockchain infrastructure. We're thrilled to welcome Paul Thomas, the founder and CEO of Somnia, a high-performance Layer 1 blockchain purpose-built for gaming and immersive digital experiences. Paul's journeys began in the halls of Goldman Sachs, but his passion for virtual worlds led him to Improbable, where he spent over a decade engineering large-scale distributed systems for complex simulations and metaverse platforms. Now with Somnia, he's redefining what's possible for fully on-chain games, enabling 1 million plus transactions per second, real-time reactive primitives, and ultra-low fees that power next-gen metaverse economies. Paul, we're really excited to have you on the show today. Looking forward to the conversation. Why don't we just start off with how you got into this crazy world of Web3? It's not often that people make that transition from where you came from to here. So excited to hear about the beginning of the journey and what brought you in and what led to Somnia.
Yeah, so Web3 journey is always quite an interesting one. So I got into the space in 16, 17 is probably more legit. I never got Bitcoin. It took me a very long time to understand Bitcoin. I don't get Veblen goods. Like price goes up, things become more desirable, more valuable. Doesn't make sense to me logically. I like to understand like businesses, cash flows, revenues. That makes sense to me. I now own a lot of Bitcoin. It just took me a while to get it. So in 17 though, 16, 17, when Ethereum came about, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This kind of decentralized world computer with this global ledger. I was like, this is awesome. This could fix so many things. So obviously I come from a finance background. I understood the financial applications quite quickly of kind of getting rid of the middleman. But then I started to think through the future of global computing, of digital assets. And I kind of started really going down the rabbit hole and thinking about all the possibilities that you could do with Ethereum and decentralized compute. So I pitched really hard internally at Improbable, where I used to work. I was like, this is going to be the future of digital assets. We need to move all of our games on top of Ethereum. They looked at me like I was mad. They were like, what? No one wants to do that. No one wants to give up control. It's crazy. So I kept pitching, and eventually they gave me a small research team to do a kind of proof of concept of what would happen if you put a bunch of other video games on top of Ethereum. That didn't work, completely failed. Basically, the issue was scalability. And also at that point, Ethereum was just way too immature to do anything kind of real time or realistically scalable. So that was a nice idea, but I kind of put that in a corner and I was like, we'll wait for the tech to mature a bit more. And so fast forward to 2019, 2020, we have now started doing what we call digital events. So we did these kind of large scale events with people like Major League Baseball, where we did digital twins of baseball matches, and large scale events with music providers like people like Universal Music. We did these big K-pop events. And again, now we have an issue of all of these events are owned by individual brands. So you have Major League Baseball over here, you have Universal Music over here. And we want consumers to go to those and ultimately monetize with digital assets. So they buy items for their avatar, they buy access, whatever it would be. And we want them all to be interoperable. So you as a consumer could go to one event, like a Major League Baseball event, buy a baseball jersey, then wear that across all the other places, go to like a music event and wear it there. So in order to do that, we needed kind of like a trustless, centralized database. And we were like, okay, we could put that all on a Web2 server that we own, but that ultimately causes a trust issue and causes a counterparty risk issue with all of these providers. So we actually thought blockchain is the correct solution for this. So we were like, okay, let's try again. So once again, I start looking at all of the blockchains in market at that point in time. The technology's come on quite a way, but the issue is still that kind of real-time scalability. These type of events, you'd get hundreds of thousands of people show up, sometimes millions. And if they want to transact on chain at the same time, that's just a no-go, basically. Blockchains weren't really designed for scalability, particularly in the EVM ecosystem. I was also very much like, we have to be on top of the EVM. I've built tech in the past where I've tried to get developers to adopt new programming languages, and I was like, it was a nightmare. I spent tens of millions of dollars and completely went down the wrong path. And so I was like, we must go where the devs are. And in the EVM ecosystem, there was nothing that really could do that kind of scale. The other issue is most of these items were like worth like $3, $5, sometimes $1 or less. And the gas fees would just be inordinate. They would cost more than the item in a lot of cases. So again, we start kind of fixing this with like Web2 caching layers and stuff like that. And it just doesn't work. We're like, ugh. So that's when I started to build out a first-party high-performance blockchain, which then actually spun out and became Somnia. So that's my Web3 journey. I was kind of like on the peripheries for many years, and then probably started being a proper builder in 2021, and have never looked back since, and incredibly passionate about the space.
That's awesome. I mean, what a story. And, you know, one of the things that Miles and I were talking about just before we started recording is people don't understand how massive gaming is. Like, a lot of times people see, you know, maybe they hear about Somnia and they think, like, why would anybody want to lean into gaming in particular as a vertical? But, you know, there's clearly such a, like, it engulfs all other verticals in the entertainment industry, whether it's music, movies, you name it. Like, gaming is so much bigger. The TAM is absolutely massive. So was that part of your thesis for why you wanted to lean into that with Somnia?
Yeah, so the TAM is part of it, but actually it comes down to a brass tacks transaction throughput. So if you think about the business of a blockchain, ultimately at the end of the day, the way you make money is people doing transactions on the chain, so using the chain. That can also be compute as well, by the way. So you could just be running logic on the chain. And so if you think about the business of a blockchain, you want to have as much compute on chain as possible. And a lot of people today push into these financial applications, which they will, if you got NASDAQ on chain or if you did all global payments on chain, that is a lot of transactions. But if you think about a game, even a simple, not a simple game, but a pretty big game, like take, I don't know, like Second Life, for instance, which is a metaversey type experience with an economy, that is probably doing in the hundreds of billions of transactions per day, I would guess. That's crazy. That's like massive orders of magnitude more than anything you see in the financial industry. And so if you're thinking about the business of a blockchain and you're thinking about how to drive usage of that, gaming workloads are orders of magnitude higher than anything else that exists at the moment in market. And so for me, it's a no-brainer that you want to go into gaming and this kind of entertainment segment and space, because you have so much higher throughput that's needed to do these style of applications. So that's just for the transactions, right? If you now start thinking about putting the logic of those games on chain to make them more decentralized, which is what we're pushing into, it goes into a whole other board game. And so we pitch this in our investor materials. We show some on-chain games that exist today that don't even have very high levels of traction, but they blow the number of transactions per second out of the water compared to every other application in the space. And so that's really why we wanted to focus on gaming. Yeah, it does have a huge TAM in terms of the entertainment industry, but if you're thinking about what is going to really drive usage of a blockchain to these millions of transactions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions even, I think gaming and digital economy workloads are going to be those massive drivers at the end of the day.
Yeah, and as infrastructure providers, like I said, I saw you speak at ETH Denver earlier this year, and what really attracted me as a nerd to the vision was just like how you were able to achieve this throughput. Like, we've talked about throughput just before, and, you know, talking about 1 million TPS, which is just an unheard of number when we think about where blockchains are today. So let's break down the design of Somnia a little bit so people understand like how you're able to achieve this and the novel mechanisms that you put into play in the architecture that allow this to actually happen.
Yeah, so Somnia is a front to right rewrite of a blockchain. There is nothing that comes off the shelf of any of the components. Many times in its history, we had other bits that were from other chains or existing libraries, but we end up having to rewrite everything in the end. So at the execution layer, we have a custom EVM compiler that takes EVM bytecode and turns that down to machine code. So that makes it run so much faster because you're not interpreting bytecode, you're now running that at the machine level. So that's super, super fast. And also that compiler has lots of like interesting tricks that makes that even more efficient. So that's one thing. We turn stuff into machine code. The next thing is the database. So we rewrote the database from scratch. It's a database called IceDB. So it's really designed for blockchain data structures. A lot of people in market today use a database called RocksDB, but it's just nowhere. It's not really been designed for kind of blockchain data structures from the ground up, and also has really inefficient read-write cache mechanisms. So we basically rewrote that from scratch and created a new database really designed for blockchain data. So that's a very important thing. What that allows us to do is have really fast single-threaded execution, which is where we have optimized the chain. Rather than a lot of chains that go down this parallel approach. The reason for this is ultimately parallel won't work for the workloads we're talking about. If everyone wants to mint an NFT at the same time, that's the same piece of smart contract and the same piece of data that's being mutated. That won't work if you try and work that through parallel threads. You need that to work very well in a single threaded environment. So that's the kind of execution part and the database part. The next part is the consensus model. So we have a new consensus model called multi-stream consensus. It's based off a white paper called Autobahn BFT. Interestingly, Say actually have started to use this in their new blockchain that they're building. So the way it works at a high level, I kind of need a diagram for this, is each validator runs their own what's called a data chain. So it's almost its own mini blockchain. And then there is a global consensus layer running across all those blockchains continually, called the consensus chain, that's streaming the data from all those data chains to the other validator chains. They then replay that data to ensure everything is consistent and in order. So that gives you a globally consistent view and makes sure all of the validators are always in sync, but allows them to progress really fast each individually. In order to solve that, you really need to optimize the networking, because you're streaming a lot of data between all the different nodes of the network. And if you want that to run over the public internet, you need to compress that down super fast. So the other part we've done is a new networking stack, which has a novel compression algorithm, which basically takes that blockchain data and compresses it down super effectively, so we can run that all over the public internet as well. I think out of all of those parts, that networking system is probably the most interesting part, but it's probably the piece that most people in the blockchain industry don't talk about enough. And it's because ultimately, when you're getting to these levels of throughput, the problem you have is a bandwidth problem. You just can't synchronize the data across the network. So yeah, that's probably the most impressive part, I'd say, out of everything.
No, I mean, it's just really interesting, like the whole thing, especially taking the two, like the independent data chains. That was something that really attracted me to the model, just when you were laying all this out. And I was sitting there as, someone who, I'm not the most technical person as the head of protocol partnerships, but like I know enough. And it was just really sort of mind blowing to see all this laid out like in your presentation during ETH Denver. And that's immediately why I made a beeline. I wanted to talk to you right after, just because it was so interesting. What do you think is next in terms of, like people, you guys are right now running testnet, mainnet is probably around the corner. I know you're doing a lot with grant programs to onboard developers. And one of the things that you kind of alluded to previously is just how simple it is for people to come and deploy things that are already EVM based, because you have that compatibility. So is that really what you're trying to do now, is ramp up just getting developers into the pipeline who are looking to actually add, novel dApps and stuff like that on top of Somnia, or building games? Like, is that what you guys are doing right now?
Yeah. So at the moment, we are currently in the testnet phase. We will be going to mainnet soon. I will say it definitely will be this year. Soon is the market word. For us, the primary focus is obviously getting ready for that mainnet. And so there's obviously technical parts to that, which we're pretty much ready. We've done a bunch of scale testing. We've done a lot of public battle testing. I think the testnet has had over 900 million transactions go through it. So it's been relatively well tested. The next part has obviously been onboarding the ecosystem projects. We have around 60 projects in the ecosystem today, and that's growing every single week. And we're very focused at bringing in more developers into the ecosystem to really try and ask the question, what can you build now that you couldn't build before with the performance characteristics of Somnia? So that's a very Web3 focused kind of go-to-market, where we do hackathons, where we do kind of dev relations. We also have incubator programs, we kind of incubate new teams. So because obviously the technology is enabling new capabilities, you really need teams to think a little bit differently, rather than kind of like, I'm just going to build a DEX that's been built before. We have some of those applications, but they're not the most interesting for us. We're really trying to see apps that are pushing the boundaries in terms of those performance characteristics. The other thing we're doing a lot of is bringing Web2 developers into Web3. So this is particularly in the games industry. We're very focused there. We're working with a lot of new independent Web2 studios and bringing them to the Web3 world. The way we're doing this, there's several pieces to this, but I think the major one is kind of meeting them where they are. So we have a set of kind of like APIs which work within game engines that allow game developers to very easily put data and logic on chain. And that means they can start being a blockchain developer without necessarily having loads of smart contract knowledge, which is really important for onboarding them quickly. So we are very focused there as well. This is because of our network. We also run incubator programs there to bring in the Web2 game devs into the Web3 ecosystem to build out the interesting content we think will really push the performance characteristics of the chain. So yeah, at the moment, I think our major focus, I would say, is on ecosystem development. And that also, we have a grants program that we allocated capital to projects. We also do incentives and a lot of co-marketing style programs as well. For us, it's all about those differentiated apps. we are not really looking at kind of doing what every other chain is doing. We're looking at differentiated apps. We are obviously very passionate about the entertainment industry, particularly gaming, but we have teams building like limit on-chain order books, basically, like hyperliquid clones on Somnia. Those apps are also very interesting to us. Basically, anything that can take the performance and scale of Somnia and kind of bring that to the masses. We are interested in all those sort of applications.
I just want to double down on gaming for just one more question for a second. A lot of gamers, they're still pretty hesitant about anything labeled crypto, blockchain, oftentimes due to past experiences, concerns about monetization strategies. So how does Somnia approach that skepticism? And, what are you doing differently to earn the trust of the gaming community?
Yeah. So we advocate, this isn't just gaming, this is all of our applications, that blockchain needs to become transparent infrastructure, is what I call it. So consumers should be going to Web3 applications and logging in, having a good time, getting something done, but not even know they're running on a blockchain at the end of the day. Similar to like Web2 and Web1, right? You don't know where your game servers are running. They're probably running on AWS or Azure, but you don't know that as a consumer. And I think blockchain needs to become the same, where they're using blockchain and using Web3, but they don't even necessarily know it. And we see this a lot in our games in the ecosystem. If you play a lot of our games, you won't even know you're on chain. You'll just click login, use your social login. It will create a wallet for you in the background, and you'll start playing the game and having fun. And you won't even know necessarily using Web3. You can obviously start to dig in a little bit more and then unlock and be like, oh, I actually own this asset. I can monetize it if I want to. But ultimately, if you just want to stay within the game experience, having a good time, that is good enough for us at the end of the day. So for me, I think the trick is basically not marketing, this is blockchain, this is crypto, this is Web3. It is focusing on the value proposition for the player. It's like, this game, you have guarantees that the game will live forever. You have ways of cashing out. From the developer's perspective, it's about, you can put these data pieces on chain and add new value propositions to the consumer much easier. So it's really focusing on not putting Web3 in their face, in my view, is the solution and fix to this. I think this is a maturity of the industry, right? We focus a lot as an industry on the technology. Like the fact that NFT, which for me is a technical implementation detail, has become a thing, is a weird outcome. Ultimately, they should just be digital assets in games and people, and then using NFTs as an implementation detail in the background. And so that's my view. It's about getting crypto first out of consumers' faces and just having high quality, fun video games that then happen to use crypto elements behind the scenes. And that gives extra value propositions to the player.
I think that mirrors a trend again across crypto as a whole. Looking at the user experience, the user interfaces that people are interacting with, operating on top of crypto without knowing that they're using it is a big trend from a lot of teams that we see and we speak to.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's maturity of the industry, right?
Yeah.
If you go back to the early internet, I'm pretty sure it's very similar, where everyone would just talk about protocols and really understand like SMTP, HTTP, and all these would be like the words people would talk about. Then eventually it just became, I use Gmail, I send an email to people. And yeah, this becomes normal parlance. I think we are going to go the same way, and we are getting there. I think we need to accelerate and make it faster. But yeah, I already see a lot of applications thinking in this way today, and I think it's really important for us as a space, if we want to get to mass adoption, that we always all talk about.
Well, we're starting to kind of lean into the whole idea of like what's coming for the future. It seems like abstraction has always been the name of the game, especially for people who are really trying to translate this to the everyday person. I laughed when you said the thing about NFT, because I never really thought about it that way, that we use it as a thing rather than as a protocol, like a type, of digital asset. And so just reducing that amount of complexity for people who are just coming into the space, I think is really the way to go. So, thinking about the future broadly about the space, or for Somnia, where do you see this? Like if you're looking out from 5 years from now, Paul, like, and thinking about the launch of Somnia, what do you hope to achieve? What do you think the future holds for Somnia?
Yeah, so 5 years, the way I see it going is it almost becomes a kind of decentralized Roblox. So if people have seen Roblox in the Web2 world, I think the Somnia ecosystem becomes a decentralized version of Roblox, but with much richer content. So I see there being a lot of high quality games that consumers can move freely between. They can move themselves between them. I don't actually necessarily believe in the interoperability story there. So the fact that I can buy like a gun in Call of Duty and use that in a Wizard game feels a bit odd. But I do believe you as a person can bring your social graph and bring your currencies with you. So you'll be able to move between all those games. There'll be entertainment experiences like big music events, big sporting events, fashion events, which you'll also be able to freely move between. And then I think the massive place we're pushing into now and will continue to push heavily into is user-generated content. I think with the advent of AI, a lot more people are going to be able to become content creators. And that's going to open up a massive set of new content that consumers are going to want to go to and have fun in, basically. And so for us, we're heavily investing in the generative AI story to enable those UGC creators to easily publish their applications on chain and then monetize via on chain mechanisms. And so a simple example we have of this today, we have this tool where you can put in a couple of prompts. It will generate you a very simple 2D game like Flappy Bird or something like that. You can then publish that on the chain. You can then monetize that through wager mechanics or access control or NFTs if you want to do that. And I think that's obviously quite simple today. But if you imagine how fast AI accelerates, I think we are all going to be able to do that much more quickly. And I think blockchain is going to become a very important primitive to monetize those applications in a simple, seamless way. And so that's the kind of place I see this kind of decentralized Roblox. We have lots of different applications that people can freely move between. There is some kind of massive user-generated content element to it with creating lots of different content for people. That's the way I see it playing out over the kind of 5-year time span. But we shall see. I think it'd be very interesting to see how we go.
No, and I think everyone else is interested as well. So for those who want to follow along that journey, see how things develop over the roadmap, where are places online, socials that people can follow so that we can stay up to date with all the news regarding Somnia?
Yep. Yeah. So you can follow us on Twitter, Somnia_network. You can also follow me. I'm 0x Paul Thomas. I also talk about Somnia, gaming, and blockchain quite a lot. The other place, obviously, is to go to somnia.network. That's our website. You can go there. If you're a developer, you can find out more about our developer programs, grants, etc. If you're an end user, you can look at our testnet. You can play around with the applications. We have these kind of quest programs, which incentivize usage of different applications on the testnet. So yeah, those are the places I'd say you can follow us and go hang out. If you want to go really deep, I get to Discord. That's where all the alpha comes out and all the interesting new stuff comes out first.
Well, we'll make sure to link those when the episode comes out, have all that in both the socials. And I got to say, as a fan, I have been following you since ETH Denver on X, and I love seeing like your posts about, what looks like, is it chunking or whatever? It's like
Chunked.
Chunks.
It's a fully on-chain version of Minecraft, which they decimated this world. Like literally, they just mined every single block, and it became like a gray blob at the end. It was absolutely incredible to see the Somnia community, what they did to it. It was so funny to watch it. We first did a week of like creative stuff where people were building cool, interesting things. And it was so nice to see all this creativity. Then we did a campaign about mine as many blocks as you can. Literally in a weekend, they mined the whole world. It was like, oh God, what have we done? But it's all on chain. You can replay the whole world and we can regenerate it back to what it was. We are going to have version 2 of that coming out in a few weeks as well.
Cool. Maybe I should jump in and try and participate because I was laughing just looking at some of the stuff that was being created. So, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on an episode of DecentraLounge. Really enjoyed having you as a guest. Really looking forward to what you're building with Somnia, especially as one of the infrastructure providers, and excited for the future that you're trying to build for not only just our industry, but for what's beyond, right, in the entire future. So looking forward to continue to work with you. For those of you who are watching or listening today, thank you for tuning in for DecentraLounge. We'll make sure to have all those socials linked when the episode debuts. And so we'll see you next time on the next episode of DecentraLounge. Take care, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, folks. Good night.
Thanks, guys.